Hi, this is Professor Hankinson, and this is just a video to give you an overview of what the expectations for the midterm exam are, and to give us an opportunity to go over some of the questions. You should have received the midterm questions this morning at midnight. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can take a look at the expectations. Okay, so as you are looking through the midterm exam information, that there's a couple of things I want to point out to you. As you know, the midterm exam is worth 125 points or 12.5% of your grade. The exam is open book, so that you can use, I'm expecting you to use all of the materials for this that we've covered so far in the class. So the textbook, any articles we've read, and the videos. The exam is not timed like a quiz. You received it today, and then it is due on Sunday, October 29th at midnight. So you have several days to work on it. So there are 6 questions on the exam, and you are asked to answer 4 of those, and we'll take a look at those in one moment. Now, a lot of students want to know, how long should the exam be? What I usually tell students is focus on answering the question, okay? That you'll see that in the question, there are lots of different prompts. And so you're going to want to, make sure that you answer all of the prompts and develop the points you're making, as well as using materials from our course to support the points that you're making. But that being said, that I tell students that generally shoot for 2 double-spaced pages per answer, okay? So that I say there that the maximum length of your exam should be about 8 double-spaced pages. Now, you'll note that I asked you to include the question at the beginning of each answer, and that you'll keep in mind that that doesn't count towards your overall page count, okay? Now, if your exam is a little bit more than 8 pages, that's fine. If it's a little bit less than 8 pages, that's fine. However, if your exam is 15 pages, you're going to want to go and edit. You don't need to tell me everything you know. Just answer the question. And if it's a lot less than 8, if it's like 4 or 5, then you're going to want to go in and ask yourself, am I actually like demonstrating the depth of knowledge that I have for this material? Okay. I want you to submit your exam as a complete document. Don't submit question by question. That's extraordinarily difficult for me to grade. Okay, and so what am I looking for in terms of expectations? Well, as it says there, the best exams are going to answer the question. So make sure that you read the question carefully and answer each of the prompts in the question. You're also going to want to use the course material when you're answering the questions. And so don't just rely on the textbook. Just don't rely on the videos. Don't make reference only to the articles. But I'm looking for you to basically use all of the material to to answer the question and to support the points that you're making, okay? There's no need at all to use sources beyond our course material, okay? Everything you need to answer these questions is in lecture, textbook, and the articles. So that if for some reason you really need to use an external resource, then you need to get my approval for it before it's added, before you use it. Okay, so keep that in mind. You want to proofread your exam, and you want to make sure that it is clear, easy to read, not a lot of grammatical errors. A couple is fine. Okay, and then also you're going to want to cite the sources that you're using. Okay, you don't need a works cited page. Okay, however, I want in-text citation. So if you make reference to the criminal justice textbook, then as here it says that provide in-text citations, example, introduction to criminal justice, page 123, or topic 5, lecture 1. Okay. And so make sure that you add those in-text citations, even if you're just sort of summarizing the points. Okay. that you're getting from those sources. And for the articles, you can just use the author's last name and page number. Okay. Any direct quotation that you use, whether it's from the textbook, lecture, or articles, you must cite it. Okay. You must cite it and put it in direct quotation marks. Okay. So any direct quote must be in direct quotation marks. And if it's not, it's going to be considered plagiarism. Okay. And you shouldn't use really long quotes. Okay. A sentence or two should suffice. And then don't collaborate with other students on writing the exam. You can definitely work with other students to go over the material and to study together. But when it comes to actually writing your exams, it needs to be your own work. Okay. And then as it states there, it's due on Sunday, October 29th at 11:59 p.m. Okay. And of course, there's all my contact information so that you can see if you need help to contact me. Okay. So those are the expectations for the exam. Let's go ahead now to take a look at the actual questions that you're going to be answering. So again, I'm going to share my screen. Okay. And let me get out of that and bring up our exam question. Okay. So I always recommend to my students that before you answer the questions on the exam, make sure that you save the document to your hard drive, to your desktop, to a zip drive. Okay. I've had students who work on their exam, fail to save it, and then go back to it, and all of their answers are gone. So your first step should be to save it to your desktop, zip drive, or hard drive, and then make sure you save throughout. Okay. And then I do want you to include the question at the start of each answer. I think that's good for you because it allows you to go back as you're answering the question and say, I'm actually answering all these prompts. And also it's good for me because I don't have to keep looking back at the questions. They're right there handy for me. There are two parts for this exam. Okay, let's see. I can annotate here. Okay, there's part one here. And so in part one, there are 3 questions. And, or I'm sorry, in part one, there are 4 questions. Okay. And actually, it's 5 questions. And you are asked to answer 3 of these. Okay. And so, let's see if I can get rid of that. Oh, who knows? It's stuck there forever. And so for the questions, let's go through each of these. So the first question, I want you to briefly describe the 4 stages of the formal criminal justice process. And sorry, my dogs are barking outside. And so we learned about the 4 stages of the criminal justice process in the first few weeks of class. Now, I want you to describe the 4 stages, but you don't need to explain each of the steps in the stage. Instead, I just want you to summarize the goals and the purpose of each stage. Okay. And so I want you there to, to do a good summary of the stage itself. So a summary of the police stage, a summary of the prosecutor's stage. Next, I want you to evaluate the steps associated with each of the stages. As you know, there are multiple steps within each stage of the process, and crucial decisions are made at each of those stages. So for each stage, what I want you to do is I want you to identify, and I'm going to use the annotate again, even though it is, it stays up there. I want you to identify the one step in that stage that you believe is the most essential step for achieving the goals of that stage, achieving the goals of that stage, and more broadly, the criminal justice system itself. So, for example, that there are 4 stages in the police stage. If you were pressed, of those 4 stages, which do you think is most essential for achieving the goals of the police stage and also for more broadly achieving the goals of the criminal justice system? Okay. And I want you to explain why this step is most essential. Okay. And that, make an argument. There's no right answer. Okay. Make an argument for why you think that's most essential. Okay. And you might even want to ask yourself, like, why'd you choose that step in the stage and not one of the other steps? Okay. And so that's something to keep about. You select one step from each of the 4 stages. Okay. And so as it says there, make sure to identify one step for each of the 4 stages in the criminal justice process. So one step for the police stage, one step for the prosecutor stage, etc. Okay. So that's that question. All right. Let me move up here and see if I can get these out of here. Well, I can't. So we will just move it up. We'll make more more annotations. All right. So for the second question here, this is about the formal the criminal justice funnel. Okay. So we learned about the criminal justice funnel earlier in the semester. And so we know that not everybody goes through all the steps in the formal criminal justice process. And so the illustration of not going through those steps is the criminal justice funnel. So I want you to describe that concept. Okay, what is it? And then I want you to explain the role that the courtroom work group and the criminal justice wedding cake play in this criminal justice funnel. Okay. And so we've talked about that in class and lecture. And so, what roles do both of these factors play in the funneling? And then finally, I want you to think critically about the funnel. And I want you to ask yourself whether or not you think the funnel is beneficial or detrimental to the administration of criminal justice in the United States, and explain. Okay. All right. So that's the second question. The third question is, see, all right. I think what I'm going to do instead is, we'll just say this. All right. So this has to do with comparing and contrasting the due process and the non-interventionist perspective. And so I want you to describe the key assumptions, values, and goals of these 2 perspectives. What are the strengths of each of these approaches? What are the weaknesses? How are these perspectives similar? And how are they different? Okay. And next, I want you to relate these 2 perspectives to the themes explored in the documentary, The 13th, which you just finished doing your a discussion on. Okay. And so I want you to briefly describe how a non-interventionist might react to the themes presented in the documentary. And then I want you to briefly describe how a due processist would react to the documentary. Okay. And I want you to make sure that you need to reference specific examples from the 13th when you're answering that question. Okay. That's something that I'm looking at in terms of, people who get higher grades on this question. Okay. And so that is question 3. Let's move on to question 4. All right. So I want you to briefly describe the ways in which the following tools measure crime in the United States. You've got the Uniform Crime Report, the National Crime Victimization Survey, and the self-report surveys. Okay. So briefly describe how they measure crime. Talk briefly about the strengths and weaknesses associated with each tool. And just keep in mind, you don't have to tell me everything you know about these 3 tools. Okay. I'm relying on you to pick out the most important aspects of these tools, to do a summary of how they measure crime. And you don't need to tell me every strength and weakness, but what you think are the most important strengths and weaknesses. Okay. Then, if you could only use one of these tools to measure crime in the United States, which would you use and why? Okay. And so make sure that you, with all the critical thinking questions, make sure that you develop them. And then the final question in this section is the question about compare and contrast, or is a question about comparing and contrasting the sociological and the rational choice theories of crime. Okay. So for each of these perspectives, address how these perspectives explain why people commit crime and how best to prevent crime. In what way are these perspectives similar? How are they different? Of the 2, which do you think provides a better understanding of why people commit crimes and why? And explain your answers. Okay. So again, sort of similar to number 4, and that you're doing some comparing and contrasting there. Okay. All right, so we'll come back in a second to look at part 2. I'm going to stop the share to see if I can get rid of those nasty annotations that are on there. All right, I'll go back to sharing the screen and see if we can get back to there. Ah, yes, they're gone. All right, so just to reiterate, everybody needs to answer 3 of the questions in part 1, okay? So there are 5 to choose from. You choose 3. In the part 2, okay, you have to answer 1 of 2 questions, and they're similar. So this question deals with a hypothetical, and if you did the extra credit assignment, you'll see that it's sort of similar. And so this gives you an opportunity to either act as the prosecutor here or as the defense attorney here, okay? And then you're going to, so for each of these, I'm asking you to do certain things. And so for 6A, acting like the prosecutor, that in order for a person to be found guilty of a crime, a prosecutor must prove beyond a reasonable doubt each element of the crime, actus reus, mens rea, etc. Now, first identify and describe each element of the crime as covered in both the textbook and lecture, okay? Remember, there were some things in the textbook that got covered that we didn't cover in lecture, so make sure that you include that. And then next, I want you to pretend like you are the prosecutor. And then I want you to review the hypothetical scenario below, and that based on that hypothetical scenario, and keeping in mind the elements of the crime, because prosecutors have to prove each element beyond a reasonable doubt, I want you to make a case for why the defendant is guilty of murder in the first degree, okay? So this question has to do with acting like a prosecutor and the elements of the crime. On this one, and this is very similar to the extra credit assignment, is that you act like you're the defense attorney. And so I want you to first explain the differences between the excuse and justification defenses, making sure to identify and briefly describe the main defenses in each category. But again, summarize. You don't need to tell me everything, okay? And then I want you to act like you are the defense attorney, okay? And that your client in the hypothetical is the one who's been charged with first degree, a murder in the first degree. And it's your job to defend that client. And so you need to, you need to have one excuse defense and one justification defense that you think would be most effective in defending your client from these charges, okay? You can, instead of, if you don't want to do one excuse and one justification, you can do one excuse and you could call into question actus reus. Remember, that is a defense as well. Like, you've got, yes, somebody was killed, but you've got the wrong person, okay? And I won't go over it in the right now. I'll leave it to you. But here's the hypothetical. It's basically about a 17-year-old who's the primary caretaker for their dad, who is dying from multiple sclerosis and who really wants to die. And that they find him dead. And so I'll let you read through the details of the hypothetical. And if you have any questions about it, you can contact me. Okay. All right. So that's it. Hopefully that was helpful. Sort of go over the questions, and some of the expectations so that you know how to like get ready for the exam and do the best possible. I'm sure, most of you are doing real well in the class. So I have a high confidence that you're going to do really well on the midterm exam. As always, I'm always available. If you want to meet for a Zoom meeting, that's fine. Can't tell you the answers to the exam, but if you have a need for a clarification, also text, email, etc. Okay, or you can even call me on the phone. All right, that's it for me. I appreciate your time and attention, and hopefully you found this little video helpful. Okay, talk to you later.